it links to something that I came across this week, which is just a small passage from Aldous Huxley. He was basically saying that we both love and despise ourselves at the same time, and that's a sort of paradox of the human condition or of human consciousness. That we have this self-concept that we always want to inflate to feel important and to gain status and feel respected, and in a way, we love ourselves narcissistically. But he also says part of that same coin is a distaste for ourselves, is a constant observation of our imperfections, and every little mistake we make, our brain can obsess over that, and we can become so self-deprecating and self-loathing. And he said that due to that distaste for ourselves, that's probably quite natural as a consequence of self-consciousness, we look to escape the prison of our individuality in things. And he, in this passage, draws a comparison between theology and mysticism and spiritual practices like yoga, and also alcoholism and drug addiction, both being routes to that loss of our individuality, both being ways to escape our individuality, and that they are two quite different fields. One seemed as negative, one seemed as pretty healthy, depending on your opinion on that, I guess. But both of them come from the same desire. And then the reason I say all this is because my first point about missing sort of philosophical contemplation and my exploring my own ideas is because, in a way, that is my route to escape my individuality, to give myself up to ideas that are bigger than me, to discuss wisdom. So I'll pause there.
Yeah, when you said Huxley, it fits very well with the reading context. There's a bit I very distinctively remember in his book, Brave New World, which is basically a dystopia where everyone's controlled on pleasure. And he l- he writes about how the people in power in that book, they were taught that from birth that particularly books and nature was painful and harmful. So in a way, if you want to keep everyone controlled, you will keep them away from books and keep them away from nature, because those are the things that allow people to think and question. And yeah, if you think and question, then you're more likely to not be controlled and escape from that sort of thing. I also picked up from your like passage on the two parts of ourselves that Huxley discussed. I wanted to add, I think they come from two big motivations, and I think there is a motivation to stay in the status quo and live your life like you're a normal person. And then I think there's and included in that I think is pleasure. And above that, I think a we have a need for more, and a need you can kind of separate it into happiness of the mind, happiness of the body. And I think there's this old Naval quote, like a very old Naval quote that I think is quite nice here. And he said, "Success comes from dissatisfaction, and happiness comes from satisfaction. Therefore, is success worth it?" Then it's a pretty tough quote to understand, because like to really like question to use and question it about yourself, because like, okay, that means to be more successful you have to go through something painful like reading a book, and that's gonna be you're gonna have some dissatisfaction there, um and so why not just be satisfied then? And that's kind of like Huxley's message through Brave New World. And I think I kind of wanted to end my reflections on your point by asking to probe you a little bit more on. You said that we are seeking to escape our individuality, and I think it's important to understand why we are trying to do that.
we can ruminate so much on our own problems and our own feelings and our own desires. And don't get me wrong, there is some utility in doing that to a degree. But, we've had discussions frequently in the past about how a lot of poor mental health states are in some way self obsessed. Anxiety tells you that everybody is judging you, or that the future's going to go wrong for you, or that you are not good enough at a certain thing. It's all very what's wrong with the self, what people will assume is wrong with the self. In the same way, depression is often, and not always, obviously, but it's often a rumination on past mistakes that one has made. And in a way, what makes us feel better in many senses is losing ourselves in a craft, losing ourselves in something we love, like, I don't know, a movie or a book, or doing a painting or a song, or losing ourselves in doing something for somebody else, or engaging in a meaningful interaction with somebody else, like a conversation or a dance, or doing, or losing yourself in a craft with somebody else, building something with somebody. Um, so I think we're all trying to do that because we can get so trapped in our own brain that sometimes we just need something that releases us. Like, I don't know, maybe this is too weird and abstract to say, but when I'm walking that line between oh, Jacob's dropped his camera. When I'm walking that line between chaos and order in a training session, when it's like hard enough that I'm engaged, but not too hard that I feel it's out of my capacity, there is no self-conscious thoughts. There is just engagement in the craft. And I get that same feeling, like I said in my first point, from engaging in ideas that feel wise and valuable to me. I don't know, there's just something that distracts me or takes me away from my ego's problems.
Mm.
And that's really, really important. And I think what Huxley was saying is that people who give themselves and devote themselves to a religion, and people that become spiritual, students and teachers and masters or whatever, and people that get lost in the worlds of alcoholism and drug addiction, they are all being motivated by that exact same desire to just escape the cursed side of human consciousness, of self-consciousness, of an overinflated ego, of an injured ego, of an insecure ego, of worries, of anxieties of self. That's what we're all trying to do. That's what enlightenment ultimately could be viewed as.
Mm. I It reminds me of, I was reading about this thing called maladaptive daydreaming. And if you don't know what that is, it's basically a condition where you have these intense, excessive fantasies in your imagination, and it almost replaces everyday reality. The brain has learned that through doing this daydreaming, through picturing up this reality, that is less painful and more rewarding than the real reality itself. So I realized that I had a little bit of this. I developed like a bad habit, especially like in the second year, like a year ago. I would have like a half an hour walk both ways, and as soon as I put that music on, I would like stop thinking about like the real world, and I would just like tune in and like just daydream for like half an hour on my way to uni. And I had to really make a conscious effort to stop this. And yeah, I just learned about this word like a couple of days ago. Like, shit, I actually had this, and it's actually a real thing that other people experience as well. It's not just me. So I think that ties into the desire to escape ourselves, because I think when we do escape ourselves, we're more likely to do that if reality isn't how we'd like it. And I think, yeah, the second thing I'd add is when you were speaking about, we have this kind of desire to escape ourselves and to get away from consciousness and to transcend our anxieties and the self. I think another approach to it, instead of instead of this kind of spiritual self transcendence, just from like reading Nietzsche a lot, would be like he would say it would be the will to power, which is essentially this belief that everyone in the world, they have a desire for power, and that can be manifested in many different ways. You spoke about sort of the addictions, and he would say that people who have alcohol addiction are manifesting that power onto themselves. Essentially, it's kind of like a Freud repression, where they are not getting a satisfactory those power animalistic desires are not getting healthily expressed, so they will come out in other ways. They don't go away, they just come out in other ways. And the desire for alcohol and to kind of finally put power over yourself and to push the limits of alcohol would be a form of cope, which would come from that will to power not being satisfied.
Mm.
And I think it's relevant for me right now because I was really thinking about it, because I've seen a lot of things this week that break my heart a little bit. Um, whether it's like hearing about, I can like if I took like a group of like in my group project, there's like two people who I know, guys that are just like they barely leave the house. These guys like they're they chill at home for like the whole day. I only see them like one time now, because that's when they finally gone to the library, because they know they actually have to do like 2 days and get their essay done. And I just feel like what is happening to your will to power is going to video games. It's getting expressed through that. And the other example that this one was the one that broke my heart is I was casually sitting in Costa, and you see like a girl that just like walks past and she has like self-harm marks, and it's like it's tough. And that like is like shit, you're the same age as me, and you're doing that because your will to power isn't like, you feel powerless, so you just want to express it over yourself. Um so this is a thing that I genuinely get behind this idea quite a lot, in that we're two 20-year-olds, 21-year-olds that are very ambitious. We don't see, like, sometimes I think it's easy for us to like to lose ourselves in what we're chasing and forget that these problems are actually there and people don't actually live like us. And there are people that do struggle and are in sort of the depths of hell with this, like getting on the wrong side of power. Because I just forget, honestly, like I just forget that that the people, the guys, there's a big like male problem of like dudes staying at home, not
Being
going
miserable.
out, kind of being an incel. And there's also problems with girls that are just like me in uni that are feeling powerless. So I think we need to find a way to obtain power in a particular craft, and that will get rid of genuinely all the anxieties. Like, I really do believe that. And it will get rid of a lot of problems, and you'll have better problems.
Okay, you've brought up a very deep, but I think very important point here. And I've made a couple notes that I'll go into now. So power is a controversial word because we associate it with like exploiting another person, or sometimes, politicians have power and they make decisions that affect people's lives, and there is uproar about certain decisions that people in power make. And if if someone uses their power for bad, uh it's it's very shocking, and that lingers in people's minds, and that becomes then the basic connotation, I think, that the average person associates with power. But I don't think that's what you're saying. I think what you're talking about is a using power for good. And in a way, I wrote it here: mastery over one's environment, or over oneself, or mastery in a craft. That's a powerful thing. If somebody is very good at a sport, they have power in that domain. That you've agreed on the rules of the game, you've shook their hand before the match or whatever, and you've agreed that you're going to put your skills against one another. And if they beat you, they were more powerful in that domain. It doesn't mean that they exploit you as a human being. It just means they have, do you know what I mean? They have a specified power. And that, I agree with you, is very important. And that will take away a lot of anxiety, because being good at something actually worthwhile does a lot for your self-esteem. I mean, I even wrote it here. It's a sort of side point at the end of what I mentioned earlier, that this is why I love the journey of mastering a craft, because it's bigger than me and it's something that feels worth giving all of myself to. It's something worth sacrificing my life for. And I agree with you, it's very important. And the other thing I thought about was when Carl Jung was talking about this idea of the morning of life. And for people that don't know, Jung split the human life into two chapters. And in the morning is when you're kind of going through adolescence and sort of into your adulthood and your prime financially, maybe your prime productively from a career perspective. And he said, in this time of life, up until about 40, I think, your ego needs to be established in the world, but in a healthy way. And that is through getting good at something. Through getting good at something and building power in a domain, and not using it to push others down or to exploit and manipulate others, but use it for productive means, to make the world a better place, to produce the best products, to create the best art, to help the most people in the most profound way you can. And he said, if you didn't do that, then when you go into the afternoon of life, which is late adulthood and old age, you'll be bitter and resentful that you didn't do that at some point in your life. You'll look back with regret and with pain, rather than moving into the more spiritually deep, self-analysis, introspection that he suggests for those later stages of life, preparing and being ready for ultimately dying. And so that's what I talk about. And so many people just do not have something to fucking sink their teeth into in life and just like commit themselves to this. Tough but meaningful. Like, it's that line of, it's difficult but worth it. It's so rare. But I think, you can find that through sport. You can find that through a musical instrument maybe, or through an art form, or through, you love science or something. I don't know, just people just don't. I think maybe it's because of the access to technology we have, and just the ability that you can just be numbed by entertainment and social media and shit, that people just don't do that stuff.
Well,
And I'm not saying that, fucking looking down at them from my pedestal. No, not at all, because I understand why that they feel the way they do, because I would and did too at points in my life. It's a real thing. It's a real problem.
yeah, I mean, sinking your teeth into something, that's the hard thing, isn't it? Um, when you were talking about power, not expressing the negative connotations, but talking about something else, I think, I guess my definition of power would be the ability to change reality, like the ability to turn your thoughts into reality. I think that one's a good a good way to think about it.
To manipulate reality positively. Yes, I like it.
Because if you're not able to do that, then you're stuck in reality. You're stuck as that person that's in his house all the day and can't change anything.
It's the
Like,
difference between, the joke we used to say years ago of, are you happening to life or is life happening to you? It is that.
yeah, it is. But honestly, that's a horrible thing, right? If you can't do anything to turn thoughts into reality, you're powerless. And um, I think a good way to really understand this would be actually through Breaking Bad, the series, because there's a lot of Nietzsche in that series, and you can kind of a couple of examples come to me of, you can take Walter before he becomes this builds his drug empire. He's a guy with like no will to power. He barely just gets by, and he sees his business partners growing this business, and he's just a chemistry teacher. And when he finally gets into the meth business, then he loves it, and he's able to just like you can see that transition of will to power in him.
Mm.
And another example in that film would be Hank when he gets hospitalized and he goes from this massive like police guy to someone who can barely move, and he finds this obsession with rocks, and that is literally just this like will to power being absolutely moved from this guy who's a badass who takes pride in his job to now I can't do anything, so my will to power has to go to something, and it goes to minerals,
Yeah.
these rocks that are just so random, and it's a small little detail, and as a viewer you're kind of like, this is weird, man, what's this character doing? But it is that his will to power is just being transcending onto something that that's available to him, and he picks this weird hobby and he just obsesses over rocks for like a season.
Yeah, no, and it's never really explained why.
It's not.
So true. That's so true.
I think lastly, a good way to think about this, because I there are negative connotations in power, but I watched this lecture recently that I think explains something that's a really nice frame, and I'd like to know your think about this. So, I think when you get more power, right, you get more status, but we don't necessarily want status to be, uh, status can be a bad thing. It can be a good thing as well in the way that we perceive ourselves and we perceive other people. The way this, I can't remember what he's called, but the way this lecturer explained it was that there are two different types of status. So there's prestige and there's dominance. Dominance is this like very like animal kingdom. I am the top of the hierarchy. I will take the best woman and I will you guys all look up to me. Whereas prestige is more this person that's got really good at a specific domain, and he's there because he's not necessarily the most dominant, but he's respected at that one thing that not many people are in that same position. So the best example I can put to you is Stephen Hawking. He has a lot of status, but he's not dominant. He's a
Mm,
cripple
mm.
in like just with his laptop open in a chair, looking looking a bit looking sometimes not like functional, same function as a normal person. But he has status, right? Like he's got
He has
prestige.
power. He has mastery in a domain.
Yeah, he does
And
have power.
that's what's so cool about being a human being is that we've kind of transcended the primordial dominance games. And, our dominance hierarchies are so versatile. You're right. And the one thing I thought about as you were saying that is sometimes as well, dominance isn't earned, whereas prestige is always earned. Because dominance can be defined by very natural things. Like, for example, weird example, but I thought about it. So, you know that I sometimes do some work in primary schools as like a visiting athlete and like do an assembly and run some PE lessons with the kids and try and inspire and get them into sport or whatever, whatever. And when I'm working in like a year 4 class, there's always one like male student who has just developed way earlier than all the others. And sometimes if the kid is sort of got the right psychological makeup, he knows that he's bigger and stronger than all the other boys, and he will use it to his advantage. And that's dominance in a quite funny to think about modern context. He's not earned that, but he's got it. He is the top of the hierarchy for now. Now, when those kids grow up and everyone else catches him up, or they go out into the working world, etc., he won't have that power anymore, but right now he does. Um, and that makes sense to me that sometimes dominance isn't earned. Sometimes you have natural ability over another person just because of a genetic thing or whatever. But prestige has to be earned. It has to
Mm,
be earned.
mm. Yeah, I like your example because we do develop it very early. We especially develop dominance early, in our own sort of hierarchies when we're a kid. There's another thing I guess I'd add to this in that I think you can get power just by being like a kind of seductive, like charming kind of person in life that you can just by being a very good at socializing, you can turn a lot of things from thoughts into reality through that mechanism. It doesn't have to be this getting very good at um a certain sort of industry niche. And yeah, Nietzsche was a bit misogynistic, but he that's what he thought. That's how he thought women mainly get power is through their charm, and they get um if they don't, he said they kind of get a bit hateful. Being on, if they're not being charming, then women get very hateful. There's a correlation there that he said, and it kind of like getting like possessed by a spirit in this. And yeah, I think I do notice that there is maybe yeah, not just girls. I'll separate into people in general, but like when you meet people in real life, I think that the hateful people they don't have charm about them, and they also the hateful people don't have much power. Everyone that hates, everyone that's going to be like a keyboard warrior, um, and leave comments on our podcast, they don't have any power, and that's why that's getting manifested. And they also don't have any charm because they're hating. So
Charming people tread lightly on this world and are playful and are flirtatious, not in the sense that there's a romantic or sexual intention. I don't mean flirtatious in that way. I mean flirtatious as in playful with language and compliments and humor and positivity and bubbliness and you know those very favorable and likable social features. They're very light. Do you know what I mean by light? That like whereas being cold and angry and bitter is heavy. It's heavy.
mm,
Um, and like you say, those people are that way for some reason.
yeah,
Maybe it's a feeling of being powerless that creates the jealousy, the envy, the bitterness. Um, Whereas if you're comfortable with who you are and you have some power over yourself and your environment, you do tread lightly in social situations. You don't need somebody else to like you or need them to do something for you. You can kind of dance in that interaction, and we love people like that. I think.
because if they're not powerful themselves, and they're at least good enough to be liked and to be around people who are powerful, so
Mm.
you can kind of get that just through networking of other people by being a great person. And I don't know, it's never anyone's goal that I don't know if it is like a conscious goal of like, I'm gonna make everyone around me feel as good as possible today. Maybe in the Eastern world it is. I don't know if it is in the West, but I'm just thinking about this particular individual who's this Middle Eastern girl who I know, and I think she's Muslim, and she she's an absolute angel. And I just don't know if she consciously thinks like I'm going to make everyone feel as good as possible, but it's what happens. And I think she is I mean, in the kind of uni situation she is around, um, you could interpret that she's around some powerful guys that would take care of her and would and are sort of ambitious and transcending. So yeah, that yeah.
It's a good point. It's interesting. It's interesting. Do you have? Was this what you were thinking when you put about your spiritual experiences and combining that with Nietzsche, or is that something else we can pivot to now?
We can pivot to that now. Yeah. So um, I reckon I've had a bit of a weird week, I guess. Like I've been kind of going through the motions and like getting what I need to get done. But like my spiritual health hasn't been in like a good place. Where I just feel like I'm kind of a bit tyrannical of myself, and I'm kind of just like going through the process of the to-do list, and it's kind of like yeah, I'm kind of a slave to it, and I'm I don't feel like I'm getting much output. Like I turn up to work, but my output will be like terrible. So it's been not a good week in that regard, and I don't feel like I'm achieving lots. So I kind of I do what I normally do, and I meditate about it. But meditate slash pray about it. But I had this one experience this week that basically, like, normally what I do is in the morning I'll do like a 10-minute meditation where I'll just sit on the bed for like 10 minutes, and I'll get to some kind of like progress, but it won't be anything crazy. This time I was like, I got back from uni, and I got the first minute I got to where it normally takes me 10 minutes to get to. And from there, I was then able to, like, the best way I can describe it is that opportunities would emerge to go deeper in just my head and in my mind, body, and spirit. There'd be an opportunity to go into the next layer, and I would take that opportunity, and I would keep taking it and taking it until I got into this really deep place that I've never got before sober. And I've only kind of experienced it in experiences like under psilocybin, where I felt a connection with God, and it was very deep. It was very heavy. It was very emotional, and every layer I got deeper. Yes, God's connection would increase, but also you could feel Satan in the room at the same time. Both of them increase together, the good and the bad. And it was a very heavy experience. I won't go into like the details on the podcast, but like it was something that I've never, like, at the height of it, I didn't know it was possible to go that deep. And to especially have that type of experience sober, I've never had that before. And I kind of took that, and I think I can make like all of these rationalizations, the good and the bad, about theology, religion, but I can't take away personal experience. These arguments back and forth, I think they're very good for building to knowing what you're committing yourself to. Potentially, if you know more, then you can identify things, and if you can identify things, then you can truly take the true interpretations of your spiritual experiences. So I think they still have their place, but it kind of, I spent a lot of time like reading Nietzsche and reading the arguments against religion, and I also spend I recently got this Bible that I've actually like been like sort of scrolling, and I can genuinely take a lot of time studying this stuff, and we can talk about it on the podcast and we can debate it, but you can never go against individual experience. And this was the first step into getting rid of what I see as this, or what Nietzsche refers to as the spirit that has possessed Europe, called Objectivism. Now, what he means by this is specifically Europe in the last couple hundred years around his time, we were struck by this scientific truth as celebrated as the destination to get to in our everyday, and to take ourselves sort of away from the metaphysical, from away from God. And this spirit it's been elevated into an ideal, this spirit of objectivism. And you can kind of look at it. The reason I say the reason why he said Europe, I think, is because when you think about it, there is a lot of like, I don't see like America, or I don't see Asia as like these objective scientific thinkers as the same as in Europe. I see them as more experimental. They're more sort of metaphysical. They're God-fearing countries, in large regard, and so I think it makes sense with Europe. And I don't think we should get rid of objectivism. I think we should see it as a spirit. We should see it as a gift from God, right? That we're able to do these great things and actually like define and shape a lot of the natural world and label them into something that a lot of people can learn from, and it makes life a lot easier to label things. But it shouldn't be a spirit that possesses people. And I think that's what's happened, is the world has become too objective, and there's and lastly, I guess the problem with this is that Nietzsche argues that we talked about a lot about the will to power. He said objectivism is kills the will to power. It paralyzes it. You kind of enter this dogmatic thing where like you're no longer being self-exploratory, and you are just taking things like, oh no, that won't work because it's because of XYZ. You're um I might actually take a break there just to sort of regather my notes and things and get your thoughts before I can get speak about the last bit, because I don't want to get it wrong.
Yeah. Okay. Um. Yeah, I like it. I like it. I think experiential knowledge is really, really powerful, but it's something so undervalued because of this pedestalization of objectivity. That there's a truth with a capital T that isn't liable to interpretation, that does exist. And if your experience and thoughts and feelings aren't in line with that truth with a capital T, in some sense, you're wrong. But should that be the metric that we measure our lives upon? Or should it be on meaning, personal meaning, feelings that things matter, experiences matter, people matter? Uh, and I think as I'm getting older, I'm moving towards this experience being the most important measure of life, not truth, objective truth. It's about experience. I mean, you know, and also there's something to personal experience that directs like our personal compass of truth and of what matters. There's something to the personal experience element that solidifies that so much more than just being told, you know? And that's why, fundamentally, my worldview has been influenced by just what I've gone through personally with my I don't know, my disability, or things during lockdown, or psychedelic experiences maybe, or general spiritual experiences, the amount of hours I spent in meditation during lockdown and things like this, and stuff I've learned in the sporting world and people I've met. All that comes together and builds my worldview. Yes, I've learned stuff from books, and there are ideas that have resonated and quotes that I've saved and things that stay in the sort of pool of my mind that I bring out in podcast conversations. But the majority of it is just through what I've felt from engaging with the world myself. And that, one could argue, that should be the metric um, for defining what we should pursue. And everything else, unless it's, unless we're sending ourselves on a really bad path, we should listen to that intuition. I mean, it's pithy and it's, said too much, but Jung's little aphorism of those who look outside dream and those who look inside awaken, there's something to it. There's
Mm.
something to it.
It reminds me of the Procrustean Bed Greek myth
Yes.
of, for people that don't know, there was this Greek legend called, well, I don't know if legend's the right word, but he was a guy called Procrustes, and he was a figure in Greek mythology who made an iron bed, and he would offer it out to travelers, and travelers would stop there in this bed, in this sort of house, and they'd try and stay the night. But if they wouldn't fit on this bed, the Procrustes would chop their legs off, chop their arms off to make them fit.
Hmm.
And he would, or if they were too short, he would stretch them out. And I think, you can correct me on the end of this if you're wrong, but I think all these travelers, they didn't really survive. They ended up just like getting cut and like not really going on to progress with their travels. And this concept is used to describe a situation where fixed reality limits everything. So
Mm.
a simple example is like, imagine you say that I'm going to wake up at 5 a.m. Otherwise, like, or no, let's say you're an objective thinker and you objectively believe that if you don't wake up at 5 a.m., you're a lazy fucker. And now what you've done is you've created a Procrustean bed where you've taken everyone that doesn't wake up at 5 a.m., you've chopped them up a bit, and you've said, okay, you're not a successful person because you don't do this one thing that I believe is a fundamental axiom. And you'll take someone who's a very successful person who wakes up at 9 a.m., and instead of questioning, like, why are they doing this? You kind of just ignore them. I think that's how it play. That would be how it would play out in real life. You'd be like, you'd dismiss it, you'd ignore that person. And the interesting thing I find about this myth is that this frame is very egotistical. The only thing being a Procrustean, the only thing the Procrustean bed serves is Procrustean himself. It is a frame that he's created for everyone else. It doesn't serve anyone else. It's very egotistical. So I think we can point out this for objectivism, and that, like, it doesn't serve everyone necessarily being an objectivist. You're trying to limit everyone, and in doing so, I think you're only going to harm yourself.
Let me expand on the Procrustean myth for a second, Jacob, because when I learned about this extra detail of it, it made it even more significant. So, do you know about the, I want to say, I hope I'm pronouncing this right, the Eleusinian Mysteries?
No.
So, basically, there's a book called The Immortality Key, and that book is about the Eleusinian Mysteries. And it's basically a series of theories that many of the ideas that built the Western world that the Greeks came to were founded in these I'm using shit terminology here, but I'm going to roll with it, in these meetups in this place called Eleusis, where thinkers would come and they would use a substance that people have argued was a psychedelic, right? And they would meet in Eleusis and discuss all the great ideas, and that was a large contributor to, you know, the Greek. And I'm kind of going into unknown territory for me here, but the many ideas we've got from the Greeks that built sort of Western civilization. Now, the bed of Procrustes myth, right, or Procrustes is a den, right, where he would lure travelers in. That myth says that he caught travelers on the journey from Athens to Eleusis when they were going on the journey to engage in an Eleusinian mystery. And so the interpretation that an author called Hassim Taleb wrote, and also something that makes sense to me, just resonates with me, is that these people were going on a journey to self-exploration, self-transcendence. They were, and if we see Eleusis then as a symbol of that, of a symbol of a journey into oneself, a journey into the truths of the universe, a journey to explore the biggest and deepest ideas, that along the way, there was somebody trying to lure those travelers off that path and lure them back into conformity. That on the path to self-mastery and self-discovery, there will be distractions and there will be creatures along the way that will try and lure you back into being like everyone else and try and squash you into this pre-packaged form that the Procrustean bed represents. Now, how good is that? I mean, we've talked about before about the woman in the red dress, the idea from the Matrix that when you're trying to do something, there will be signals of pleasure that will try and lure you off that path. That's what the woman in the red dress represents. But the Procrustean bed is something different. It's similar to that, but it's something different. That there will be a force trying to pull you back into being like everyone else, and trying to, in your idea here, which makes a lot of sense to me, there will be a force trying to lure you back into the objective worldview, lure you back into following that there's one way that reality exists as, there's one way that we should see life. There's one way that we should measure the quality of life, and take you away from exploring one's own personal experience. I don't know. Maybe I'm
Wow.
stretching, but
No, that was good, man. That was really good. I like that. Um, yeah, because I think when you're on an exploratory path and you're trying to achieve a level of uncertainty, um, there will be some people that want to put you back into certainty. We've discussed how certainty kills and it removes the spirits. And I think these scientific, objective people, they're envious. They don't understand the natures of, I think Nietzsche puts it, whose elevations which they cannot attain. Because think about it, by being an objectivist, you've limited not only other people but yourself, because you can't do anything that is uncertain. You can't do anything that's exploratory. You have to just rely on you just have to rely on the world as it is, the universe as it is, this limited reality that you've created. So you're going to be envious of people that are transcending it. And I think that's what it points to for me, is that story is it illustrates it perfectly, that is generally what's going to happen, because these people, they're also very skeptical. They're very skeptical at any idea that is a bit kind of risky, a bit kind of revolutionary. You hear something, you don't agree with it, you dismiss it. You're skeptical. And um your any kind of idealism, big ideas, and things like that. So it's very clear to me. And I think my last thing I guess I'll point to is that Nietzsche ended this passage and he was like, this is what philosophy has come to. It is now it's turned into a critical science rather than an exploratory thing. And it was quite a saddening note, but he was someone that was going to try and change that. And he pointed to Kant as a lot of the problem. He pointed to Hegel and some other guys as a lot of the problem. And then he also made this comment about how a lot of these exploratory people, they're often females, and they're often and males are more objectivists. Just in our nature, and to me, it made a lot of sense that there is a kind of a gender difference here. I do find females a little bit more kind of right brain and men a bit more left brain, and maybe that's due to our sort of levels of conscientiousness difference and openness. But
To
I
me,
think
what that does, just to jump in before you go on, is it's because the feminine to me is the force of creation. It is where the life is created in the feminine. And in that there's an element of mystery and chaos to how things become, how things be, how things are created, and how a human goes from a single cell, but how the universe and the planets and the stars and the solar system came to be, full stop. In that there is chaos, and in that is mystery, and that creation is a feminine energy. Anyway, carry on. That's what I think.
I think that's good actually, because creation would make sense, because when you have baby, it's like, yes, it's not just science, bro. Like that's something way bigger than science, and you have the ability to do that as a female. So maybe that's the reason. Um, so I think the lesson there with the gender thing, I think you can say, you need both objectivism and subjectivism, and this is generally the thought that I've came to, is yes, there are things that, like, let's take a topic like morality. You can generally agree that objectively, like, you're not supposed to murder people, but there is some context which you could argue it. But that's what I want to come to, is that yes, objectively, there are some truths that are generally in place, but there is a level of subjectivism. And I think that's the same in metaphysics. I think that's the same in a lot of these different philosophical branches, that there is a genuine vibe of objectivism, and then there is a lot of subjectivity is under that as well. And I think that's just how the world works. And
Well,
I think
that's
with the male and the female, that's like we want both. Both is good. Both is good, guys.
this is. I mean, maybe we're stretching here and we're going into uncharted water, but fuck it, because it feels right. Maybe this conversation is going into what the structure of reality is. It's two polar opposites coming together as one. It's the yin yang. It's chaos and order. It's masculine, feminine. It's also objectivism and subjectivism. You know what I mean? It's capital T truth and personal truth from experience. It's I don't know. It's reality and meaning. You know, they are. I don't think you can have meaning with just a capital T truth objectivism. It needs to interact with the subjective. Carl Jung would put it, the two worlds of the human being have to come together. The physical world that can be measured by the natural sciences, and the internal world that is studied through religion and philosophy. Those two worlds have to collide to make the human being, to make the fully integrated human being, the human being with a soul, right? With a mind, a body, and a soul. That's individuation. That's the complete integrated individual. And it makes a whole lot of sense.
Mm. It's something to do with like the internal and the external world, isn't it? As well, being aligned as like,
Yes.
yeah, yeah. So maybe that's what, yeah, individuation and becoming a human is all about. So I think the solution here is don't get too caught up in this objectivism spirit. And there's going to be a lot of haters, but those people's lives are a bit limited anyway. So, like, they're not really worth fussing about. And learn from the Procrustean Bed situation, um, and like, like, acknowledge that it's just a part of it. Like, you're on the way to your own sort of enlightenment. There's going to
Yes.
be people that pull you back into it, that
That's the
pull you
best
back
way of
into the
putting it.
worldliness.
When I was talking about the Eleusinian mysteries, what they represent is a road to enlightenment. And it's significant that the bed of Procrustes was on that road. On the road to enlightenment, that's when travelers would be lured in to conformity. Now, one more thing I just want to linger on before we pivot or potentially conclude the episode is this world of experiential knowledge, this world of personal meaning, and how significant it can be if we just let go of or not let go completely, but of just release the grip on this fixation on objectivity. And this is when I think about the hero's journey again. Okay. And, we discussed before recording, it's been confirmed that I'm going to be moving to a foreign country, to play sport next year for a living, which is just mental and is an absolute blessing. And I will be viewing that through Joseph Campbell's hero's journey of, leaving the known world again and going into the unknown and facing a series of new trials and tribulations and undergoing death and rebirth of myself, both as a person and as an athlete, and hopefully coming out the other side with more wisdom to share with my community and my friends and my loved ones. And is any of that actually objectively true? Or is that just a mental frame I've put over my life? Well, it's the latter of those two. It's a mental frame, but it has so much tangible emotion and meaning for me. So we can't just say it doesn't matter or it's not true. I don't think we can just cut it away.
Mm. I think it's similar to the world of archetypes in that I feel like there is a bit of, so the hero is kind of an archetype, right? And within these archetypes, there is a bit, I feel like, correct me if I'm wrong, but there is a bit of all these archetypes within us. So
Well,
we have the potential.
that's what Jung said the collective unconscious was, right? The collective unconscious. So, putting in this context, me and you are born, we are born with some basic biological structures, right? We both have a spinal cord and a nervous system. We both have a brain with, the primordial brain regions, the brainstem, et cetera, hypothalamus, and then we get the higher cortex with all those lobes and et cetera. We're all born with four limbs, unless there's birth complications and et cetera, et cetera. There's biological basics that every human has. Okay. And these are hardwired through evolution. What Jung said is the collective unconscious is the basic structures of the psyche that every human being has. And these basic psychological structures are the archetypes. So we know, we can recognize patterns of being associated with the hero and the wise king and the trickster, all that kind of stuff. We know that implicitly because it's part of our basic structures in the psyche. That I just thought I'd add that because I came to that articulation of it the other day, and it makes sense to me now.
Yeah, that's good because with those themes, with those archetypes, you never forget them. They're always a part of you. Like you don't, you can be like 5 years old and you can recognize the wise king, or you can be 80 years old and recognize the wise king. And I think that would make sense in what Jung said in that frame, and that is because it's just a part of us. We just recognize it implicitly. You never forget an archetype, and yeah, I think I'm also, I don't know if Richard Dawkins touched on this, but isn't archetypes similar to memes, or is that like a kind of different thing?
I'm not sure on that. I can only stretch and say what my gut says, which is that a meme is it's like an idea that carries on through generations and spreads across population because it's adaptive. And it might be one that spontaneously emerges rather than being something innate like an archetype. But I'm not sure on that.
Okay. Wasn't there a part of the collective unconscious that was like all so everyone kind of has this part in us that is similar to everyone else in our mind, but within that there is that it then it connects to like a source, and for him that source was like a god.
Maybe you're thinking about his idea that each of us has a self, and the self is like the layer that exists underneath all other parts of the psyche, which is the source of all of them, but it also contains all the sub-personalities and aspects of our psyche that haven't been manifested yet, the potential selves. But no, I don't know if he said anything about like where our collective unconscious comes from. But yeah,
Right, okay.
but this collective unconscious idea, right? This is to me why it makes sense that children can understand very complicated stories from very early on. It makes sense why bloody Scar kills Mufasa and blames it on Simba, and then Simba has to leave the kingdom, and then he returns to the kingdom possessed by the spirit of his dead father and takes back what is rightly his. Like that,
Mm.
that's a sophisticated story. But you watch it as a 5, 6, 7, 8-year-old, and you're so gripped by it. You know?
Mm. Yeah, I mean, I can take it from like I did GCSE film studies, and we were taught about this word's connotation and to it and how directors would create specific um actions within their films, and and they were thinking two steps ahead. There's like placing that hero on a hill in comparison to the villain who's lower, and there's what that then connotes to the viewer. So there's actually the physical thing itself and what it means. And you can, for that example, I was thinking of like Star Wars, of like, I have a high ground Anakin type thing. And you kind of understand that, yes, there's a camera angle there, but like that camera angle is like, it's called like yeah, it'd be a high angle. It would mean if someone like typically has a higher ground, then they're more powerful than you, and the Anakin would be weak on that specific thing. And like, why does that? Why? Like, what? Why does someone standing on a hill versus someone who's on the floor, looking up at someone on the hill? Why does that equal power? Like, why is there a thing like that? And you understand that as the viewer. And I think I can put that in as like how, in a similar way, how these directors have like put meaning and connotation into their films. I think that is designed, and they know something about how humans understand, like how humans understand reality.
Well, look at Pride Rock in The Lion King. It's the biggest fucking rock in the kingdom, and that's where the lions live. That's where the royalty of that's where the 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 predators and the animals at the top of the hierarchy exist. It wouldn't make any sense if the kings of the kingdom lived in a hole in the ground. There are just certain archetypal features of stories that make sense. Yeah, you're right.
Yeah, it's not even characters. It can literally be the lighting. It can be the camera. The camera angle. It can be the sound that's archetypal. It can be what the props and what's on the screen as well. So I think there are all these elements of life that we understand from that kind of Jungian archetype sense, maybe.
Yes, yes. Look, man, I think we should conclude there. But that was a good episode. Like, it's one of those where we stretched out beyond the basic points that we had for the episode, and the conversation took on its own life.
Mm,
It became alive.
mm,
It's been a weird few months, month or two, with how busy we've both been. But we've got a very exciting summer ahead, and some very exciting changes in our lives that have implications for the podcast. So, yeah,
yeah,
it's
I
good.
think we both needed this.
100%.
um, yeah, thanks for listening.